Hello and welcome to my channel, where I'll be telling you all kinds of strange stories, ranging from true crime to some much less believable, although just as fascinating, tales. For today's video, we have the sickening story of Sean Vincent Gillis. Listen in and see what you think. He was so heinous that even he claimed to be pure evil. However, although serial killer Sean Vincent Gillis freely admitted to his crimes and may have shown some real sorrow and remorse, the specifics of his killings will undoubtedly leave you believing that he was nothing but the pure evil he claimed to be. Sean Vincent Gillis had a difficult upbringing. He was born on the 24th of June 1962 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His father Norman, who struggled with alcoholism and mental illness, left the family not long after Sean's birth. His mother Yvonne, who worked for a TV station, raised Sean with her parents' help. Despite the difficulties of growing up without a father, little Sean appeared to do well as a quiet child in Baton Rouge. During this period, his mother remembers Gillis as a good boy with average school grades. Despite having friends in high school, Gillis had a violent side to his nature that surfaced now and again. During his teens, a neighbour called Carolyn Clay reported hearing a loud pounding noise around 3 a.m. and seeing Gillis in his front yard violently hitting some rubbish bins. He was prone to fits of anger like that, Clay recalled. He was an angry young boy. But that rage would eventually turn into something much worse. Sean began amassing arrests when he was 17 years old. Traffic tickets, DUI, marijuana possession, criminal trespassing, and contempt of court are all examples. Sean Vincent Gillis did some community college after high school and hopped about between low-paying jobs while still living with his mother. But when Gillis was 30, his mother left to pursue a job offer in Atlanta, leaving this still angry man on his own for the first time. Gillis quickly became lonely and fascinated with pornography to the point of neglecting his work. Despite this, Gillis's mother constantly gave him money to compensate for his lack of a job. Rather than this making him think kindly of his mother, he was still angry, upset that she had left him. Neighbours said that he would lie on the lawn at night and bark at the moon while shouting obscenities at his mother. This is clearly troubling, but more worrisome was the fact that he was caught peeking through a neighbour's window in 1992, at a time when his fixation with pornography was escalating. Despite all of this, however, Sean Vincent Gillis did find someone to love, or at least to like enough to begin and sustain a relationship with. This was a woman named Terry Limone, and they met in 1994. You might think that this relationship would finally have made him happy. That same year, however, he murdered his first victim. Sean chose his victim in March 1994, soon after beginning to date Terry. He crept inside the affluent retirement community of St. James Place, where Anne Bryan, 81, lived. After he was arrested, Sean later claimed that he only intended to rape the woman, but as he touched her she screamed, sending him into a frenzy. Anne Bryan was stabbed over 50 times in total, and most of the stab wounds were in the head, genitals and chest. When he was done with her corpse, he left her there to be discovered. This was the only body he didn't dump. His porn addiction began to shift as a result of this murder. He was now concentrating on websites that catered to women who had been raped, killed or mutilated. He printed out pictures of the images that most piqued his interest. He showed one in particular to Terry. It showed a dead woman, but it didn't seem to upset her. She subsequently stated that she just brushed it off and, of course, continued to be with him. For the next 5 years, Sean lay dormant in his killing. After he was arrested, a reporter asked him about this. Sean replied he didn't kill anyone during that time because he was happy. Gillis got a job working at a convenience store over those 5 years. It was just across the street from Anne Bryant's house where he had viciously raped and killed her. Perhaps he enjoyed being so close to the scene of his crime. Maybe he even fantasized about it, remembering that good time. It certainly can't have helped his obsessions. Sean made up for his time off between January 1999 and January 2000. He murdered 4 women in that year: Catherine Ann Hall, 29, Hardy Schmidt, 52, Joyce Williams, 36, and Lillian Robinson, 52. Hardy Schmidt, the third victim, had piqued Sean's interest in May 1999. She'd been jogging around South Baton Rouge. He then stalked the same area for 3 weeks, hoping to catch her off guard. He was in his car when he saw her running on Quail Run Drive at 5:30 a.m. on the 30th of May 1999, and he took advantage of the situation. He sped up and ran his car into her, mowing her down. Hardy fell into a ditch, confused and in urgent need of assistance. Sean dashed out of the car, wrapped her neck in heavy-duty wire plastic wrap and forced her into the vehicle. He drove her to a spot off the Highland Road and raped her. He then murdered her and placed her body in the trunk of his white Chevy Cavalier. He would keep her body for 2 days before disposing of it. In October 2000, Sean murdered his 6th victim, Marilyn Nevels, 38. He then stayed inactive for 3 years until murdering Johnny May Williams, 45, in October 2003. Finally, in February 2004, he murdered Donna Bennett Johnston, 43. All of his victims were raped, strangled, stabbed, had their bodies mutilated, and were raped again post-mortem. He would photograph the bodies after desecrating them. He would snap photographs of himself with the bodies on occasion too. All of the victims looked to have been partly strangled using zip ties, most likely to keep them under control so Gillis could carry out his sick fantasies. Sean severed the hands, feet, breasts, arms, and sections of the leg. He would use a knife to remove any tattoos and their nipples. Later, when being questioned, Sean said that he enjoyed eating chunks of his victims' flesh. He even confessed to keeping the bodies after they were dead for a time so he could continue to enjoy them. He would sometimes bring them into the shower with him. He even played dress-up with the bodies, painting their nails and doing their hair as if they were dolls. Finally, after keeping a few trophies for himself, he would take what remained of the bodies and dispose them in places far away from Baton Rouge. Despite the fact that the murders had been discovered, the police initially had no suspects. They had DNA, but it didn't match to anybody in the system, and they couldn't identify anyone who was related to any of the victims who was a match. All of that changed when they discovered the body of Donna Bennett Johnston, who was murdered on the 26th of February 2004. Her remains were discovered in a drainage ditch near Ben-Hur Road, south of Louisiana State University, and in a stroke of luck, police discovered tire imprints in the mud at the crime scene. The photographs and moulds of the tire imprints were sent to the Louisiana State Crime Lab, where they were verified to be a match for a rare Goodyear tire. These tires were manufactured for 3 years and sold for just $90 in the greater Baton Rouge region. Police got a list of all the sales of those tires, and that gave them a list of prospective suspects. At this point, every name on the list was DNA tested, and of course, one of those names was Sean Vincent Gillis. Following his DNA test, police detained Sean for questioning while conducting a search warrant at the house where he lived with his girlfriend Terry. Inside the house, they discovered hundreds of images of his victims and him with the victims' mangled corpses. They discovered additional photographs of his victims on his computer, as well as images of them in the boot of his car. On top of this, when the house was investigated by crime scene techs, they found a load of body parts that Gillis had brought home with him and kept as souvenirs. Techs also recorded the number of saws, knives, machetes, zip ties and other weapons found in the house. The majority of them tested positive for human blood and were connected to the victims. When detectives heard Sean confess instead of disputing the facts, which is exactly what he did, it had to be refreshing, if nothing else. But that didn't make what they were seeing any less traumatic. "I'm sorry I hurt people," Sean told the detectives, "but I would do it again. You let me out on the street, I'll find somebody before sundown. If anything in my useless life comes out," he said, "help the little girls today not to be the premature corpses of tomorrow." It's difficult to tell if he really felt regret or just believed he should. As most people interested in true crime know, it can be hard to know whether a serial killer's feelings are genuine or taught. While in prison, a friend of his final victim wrote to Sean. The killer appeared to show remorse, but at the same time talked as if he was detached. He said, "She was so drunk, it only took a minute and a half to succumb to unconsciousness and then death. Honestly, her last words were, 'I can't breathe.' I still puzzle over the post-mortem dismemberment and cutting. There must be something deep in my subconscious that really needs that kind of macabre action." The friend, Tammy Purpura, turned over the letters from Sean to the prosecution's office to use at the trial. Sean admitted to wanting to have sex with his mother when being questioned by the district attorney, and he talked about how her abandoning him pushed him over the brink. He talked warmly about his mother's attention to him as a child, as though he never wanted to outgrow it. Yvonne spoke for the defence, telling the jury how her son had grown up to be a well-behaved, well-adjusted boy with a solid social life, demonstrating that the bond between this mother and son was out of the ordinary on both sides. Unsurprisingly, the court didn't see the same man his mother did, and the jury found him guilty. Sean Vincent Gillis is currently incarcerated at the Louisiana State Penitentiary and will spend the rest of his life there. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed the content, click the subscribe and like buttons so you can receive more content like this strange story every week. See you next time.